What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Space Marine Sampler series. This is where I'm going to take an at-a-glance style look at a particular Space Marine chapter and just Space Marine chapters, Loyalist Space Marine chapters. And I'm going to break down what their color scheme is. I'm going to break down the lore a bit and some thoughts on collecting them on the miniature side of things. But we're also going to break them down in purposes of Space Marine 2. And I'll talk about uh, either achieving a scheme or why I use a particular class with a certain already established chapter in Space Marine 2, and just have fun with it that way. So, hopefully, you'll stick with me and share your thoughts. For this video, I wanted to go over one that is now in the game. You need the Raven Guard DLC pack so you can unlock them. But even before that happened, people were doing their best approximations for them, which is pretty cool. And if you want to go retro, you can represent kind of their quote unquote original scheme without needing the DLC either. I am talking about the Raptors that were also known as Raptor Legion back in the day. Now, this is a bit of canonicity conflict potentiality for people. Instead of saying they're one and the same, some people out there will say they're two different forces. But much like the Mentors originally were the Mentor Legion, I feel like the Raptors were originally the Raptor Legion, and it's kind of generally accepted on the whole, for the most part by the majority, that these are the same forces, just a bit of a retcon change, right? I mean, look at the Firehawks. They got a whole different scheme. They kept their name, sure, but they didn't have the word Legion after it. Considering both the Raptors and the Mentors have existed for a long time in the lore, I feel like they were back during a time when we didn't really have the Heresy/Great Crusade fleshed out particularly well. There was a time like that. And once legions became standardized for the Great Crusade Heresy time period for Astartes, and that's it, and then it was chapters after the fact, we kind of see the dropping of the term legion and the kind of retconning away from it, if you've noticed. So I'm going to say they're one and the same, because that's the generally accepted way it is anyway. So I'm talking about the Raptors. These are a second founding successor of the Raven Guard, which is a rarity and pretty cool. Now, you've been looking at both schemes here. So let's talk about their original scheme, shall we? Because it's quite different from what we probably know them for more so as a group. So back when they were called the Raptor Legion, they had a very different color scheme than what we're used to seeing. They had yellow in the shoulder pad trim and inset. They had yellow from the knees down, so the knees and the greaves, if you will. The bottom half of the legs were yellow. And even the hands specifically of the armor were yellow. The chest emblem was done in a silver, and the rest of the armor was done in blue. Red helmet lenses, black squad markings, and a black bird head and profile. Slightly different design than their modern look, but that was their symbol, and it was in black. That is their original look. I believe their weaponry was also in black or in blue, whatever. Doesn't really matter for Space Marine 2, but matters more if you want to collect their miniatures, or collect a miniature as them. In any case, that was the original Raptor Legion look, quite different from what we know them for now. Now, I don't really know what their style of combat and specialties were as the Raptor Legion. If it's the same force, we can assume perhaps a bit more of a focus similar to their modern day look. I kind of recall a certain bit of lore surrounding their change, but I think that was just maybe filler headcanon to kind of justify it. Regardless, this is the original look. Quite striking, quite different, and in Space Marine 2 we'll see it. When I talk about that, it makes a pretty striking visual as well, even though we can't perfectly represent it, and we'll see that later. But the Raptors as we know them and as they're collected now and showcased all the time is quite a different story. And that is a much more understandable camo style olive dull green. And this is across the entirety of the armor. Their chest emblem is a dark silvery color or dark gray, depending upon your preference. Sometimes you can see shoulder pad trim like that, not always. Helmet lenses are red. Their squad markings are white with any numerals over that white done in black, of course. Otherwise, any other markings are white, including their symbol, which is a bird head and profile of a slightly different design in white. Their weapons are either black or the same green. Now, with that said, this chapter is notable and known for using camouflage and is really open to doing so. When that happens, you might have a shoulder pad inset in green or a certain section of the vehicle in green just so you know what chapter it is with their squad markings and stuff on it. But they are open to using camouflage, which is a great accent thing to keep in mind if you're going to paint out miniatures for them, and we'll get to that too. In any case, if they are going to represent company color, it's done by a stripe either on their chest or on their helmet. Basically, if they have a chest emblem at all, it'll be on their helmet. If their chest is barren, then there'll be a stripe on the chest, typically. And that's the visuals of the Raptors. Quite different from their original look. Much more subdued, much more camo-y, because that's their whole shtick. They're much more like tactical, if you will, and specialized in a certain way of fighting that we know of for sure. And part of that is the acceptance and preference of utilizing camouflage versus just wearing their colors openly. And their colors are very dull, kind of almost natural camouflage for jungly, forested, and greenland environments anyway. So, with that said, let's go into representing them in Space Marine 2, and then I'll discuss their fighting style a bit and why I, do certain things with why I use one class for the actual Raptors we know specifically. Anyways, for Space Marine 2, to represent the original Legion, Raptor Legion look, you can do whatever class. You can do whatever class for the normal Raptors or the regular Raptors as we know them for it too. There's no need to go one particular class. But I'm just saying this because I chose tactical just to be different. Now, I believe, and I could be mistaken, the leg camo pattern that lets you do half the leg in one color, half in another color, I believe that is just unlocked for everybody. I believe they just added to the game for everybody. I could be mistaken. It could be part of a chapter that you have to unlock to get, but I don't believe it's part of any DLC. So you should be able to get it at some point if it's not already unlocked for you. From there, we will be doing the shoulder pad and its trim in yellow. I believe, Everland Sunset because it makes a nice bold yellow color that doesn't look neon-y like the yellow does. And for the bottom half of the legs, the same color. Now, right now, there is no camo pattern for the arms, so we can't do the hands in yellow. But we're so close to representing them that anybody who knows this scheme, especially if you are going to use black squad marking and a chapter symbol, anybody who knows this scheme is going to be able to recognize it being done in Space Marine 2. It's very striking, right? Because you have blue for everything. That's not the yellow that I mentioned. You have that yellow. You can get that symbol pretty close, and in black. You can do it in black. If you have the Raven Guard DLC pack, you can get that symbol, I should say. And you can do the squad markings in black. So you can make a very striking original Legion color, original Raptor Legion color if you want, which is pretty cool. For the Raptor chapter as we know them now, if you have the Raven Guard pack, you can just unlock them. And I recommend that because it looks great. But before we got that, people have been doing an approximation of them by unlocking one of the green colors in the color palette that we have and basically painting up the armor to look that way. Now, that's fine if you don't want to buy the DLC. You can definitely do that. Play them with a more intricate shoulder pad eventually unlocked, so you block where the chapter symbol will be anyway, and you're good to go if that matters to you. So we have a pretty simple way to get either look if you want it, with of course the Raptors chapter look, the modern Raptors look, being unlockable with the Raven Guard DLC. What's nice about the Raptors look for their more up-to-date visuals with the olive green is that the more plain the armor, the actual more fitting it is. So let's say you haven't really done much with the heavy in Space Marine 2, but you've unlocked the Raptors visuals. Well, that's okay. Slap the Raptors color on there, And it looks very fitting because you're very plain. They don't do super ornate. It wouldn't work if you were like this olive green with a bunch of gold and bright silver adornments everywhere. So it works out very nicely. And of course, the more you have to customize how you want the armor setup, you can make it look really cool and really appropriate. I went with the sniper because of the way the Raptors fight. The way the Raptors fight is a emphasis and importance on marksmanship, on ranged combat. They don't shy away from close combat, they just don't actively seek it out. They want to be most efficient, and the most efficient way to take something out in 40k is in range. There's no reprisal right away when it's in range. You could outrange the enemy, so there's not going to be any reprisal for a little bit of time. You can pick them apart and whittle down their numbers, so the eventual reprisal is weaker than what it would have been, and you still pick them off, right? So they focus predominantly on ranged combat. They value marksmanship extremely highly. The chapter master is part of their best marksman, for example. Not that that's a requirement, but it tends just to work out that way. And they have no problem in utilizing camouflage to maximize their range capability. Obviously, lore-wise stuff in the game, it won't matter because unless there's a special rule that the unit has or that you might have, making them look camouflage, whatever, doesn't do anything except look cool. For vehicles, you can do the vehicle predominantly in camouflage and then like a certain section in that green with their symbol and whatever on there in terms of painting up the miniatures, so you can tie it all together if you don't want to do camo on your power armor guys. If you want the power armor to be that dull olive green, you can still do camo on the vehicles. That can help the vehicles get into position to unleash the cargo, right? But in terms of miniature painting, you could also do any cloth that isn't basically anything that isn't a parchment for a purity seal. You could do up in a camo pattern to kind of help quote unquote break up the silhouette of the Astartes. So if you have a tabard, a robe, a cloak, a cape, any type of stuff like that on the model, don't feel like you can't use that model. Just do it up as a camo pattern on that piece. Weather it up, make it dirty on the bottom, dirty up the power armor. It's going to look cool, it's going to look appropriate. And that's another thing. If you think, well, I like the lore of these guys, but they seem a little dull to collect, you have the camo that you do on vehicles or on power armor. You have the camo you can do on any cloth, and you can practice dirtying up and dinging up and maybe even doing some battle damage on the armor as well. Scrapes and dings and mud and stuff that way to really break up the monotony of the dull green everywhere all the time. In any case, that's why I use the sniper in Space Marine 2, as you've been seeing for the standard Raptor gameplay, which is funny because the mentors also use the sniper, but I did break up the monotony of more sniper footage by having the tactical footage in there a little bit with the original color, because why not? In any case, you of course can go with any of the classes in Space Marine 2, but you get the chameleon cloak ability to go invisible, which is very fitting for the Raptors. It's a focus on ranged combat and is still quite capable in close combat if you know how to use the combat knife and everything. So a very, very fitting class to represent the Raptors if that's how you want to go about it. Of course, the heavy works too, and everybody else does too. But I was just focusing on what felt the most juicy lore-wise for them, and that would be the sniper. So with that said, that's the Raptors chapter. It used to be known as the Raptors Legion, widely accepted. Two very different color schemes, both representable on the tabletop or in Space Marine 2, which is a pretty good effect. And both can be represented without a DLC pack, even though the DLC pack has the standard chapter right there for you. So, up to you. All depends on what you want to spend money-wise outside of getting the game. And with that said, that's all I got for you on this one. What are your thoughts on the Raptors chapter? Let me know. And be sure to check out the link in the video description to my Mechanical Mayhem channel if you're a fan of Battletech or have an interest in it at all as well. And until next time, take care.